Know yourself, grow yourself, part 2.
Okay, we always say at the end of ShrinkChicks, to grow yourself, you gotta know yourself. But what's that really mean?
And we did an episode on it 4, so we're going to do a part 2.
And to be honest, if we're being 100% honest, we have no idea what we talked about in that first one.
That was recorded a very long time ago. So we're going to do a new and improved version of Know Yourself, Grow Yourself part 2. Yes.
Since then, we have grown.
We have grown.
And we have had to relearn who we are.
And we were saying, like, right before this, as we were prepping for the episode, right? There's, like, this huge importance on... I think in our generation about like knowing yourself, know all parts of yourself. And I think part of that, like you have to say to yourself is like, why do we have such like an importance of that? You know,
right.
Like what are you thinking that's going to mean? Because I think a lot of people have this idea, well, if I know myself fully, then I can stop myself from reacting and stop myself having from like, you know, all these different things.
Protecting myself in some way.
But like the reality is like life is still going to happen. So even if you understand your triggers and your own family of origin shit and your past life trauma and your fucking dog's doctor's shit, like there's still going to be stuff that happens. No, too much?
I like that. Your dog's doctor's shit. I think that's an important part. I think that's you really have to learn what your dog's doctor is struggling with. I think that makes sense.
So we actually have a worksheet with today's episode that I guess will be on social media. I don't know.
We don't know. We haven't thought that far through.
Somehow you're going to have access to
You're going to be able to get it.
So I think you follow us on ShrinkChicks and you're going to have access to this worksheet that you can then download, print off, whatever, do yourself with some of these questions so you can go a little bit deeper. And then we have some Q&A.
Okay. And also we wanted to do this episode because we also wanted to announce that we are finally going to have merch for you.
Because people, okay, so we kept doing these giveaways and people were like, well, can I just buy one?
And we were like, we got to get on it.
So now you can go to ShrinkChicks.com. You can get some great merch, some phenomenal sweatshirts and hats if you're interested in that kind of thing and want to support us.
Check it out.
Because a reminder, we make no money from doing this, basically. Okay. Little to no fucking
quick reminder.
Very good, yeah. So, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, Know Yourself, Grow Yourself, part 2. So, one of the things we want you to start with that you're going to see on this worksheet is what are my values? And one of the reasons we ask that is because we're actually not here to tell you what's wrong or right. We're here to tell you about what works for you. So some people can have a really big importance of being famous or being rich or having status or having ownership, right? And it's really not up to us to say which of those things are wrong or right. It's just about what are those values for you. What is it when I say the word integrity? What does that represent for you? When I talk about peace of mind, calm, zen, what are all of these things mean for you?
I think that figuring out what your values are too can be really challenging given that we live in a society that tells you how you should feel or what you should think about a certain thing. And maybe in your family, right, they had certain values that they said, oh, these are the things that you should value. And I think a lot of the times when people come into therapy, they want us to tell them too, like, what should I value or what should I look at? What are the important things? And it's actually our job to help you figure out what that looks like for you. And getting to know yourself is also getting to know what your specific values are separate from other people.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? We can also, I think, somehow attach a list of values.
Yes, we can. We can do that too. Okay.
That you guys can check out.
Yes. What have I been taught? So this also in some ways goes back to values. If I grew up in a home that was taught that there is an extreme value placed on never betraying your family, well, that's going to probably end up being one of my value systems. And once again, we're not saying that's a bad thing, but it's something to keep in mind is what was I taught and does it actually align with who I am as a person?
And what are the ways in which your values are playing out in your everyday life, right? Are the things that, let's say, if we use the family situation, where are you so protective over your family or you're having some sort of reaction over your family? Is it still working for you the way in which your values are playing out in your life? So that's something to look at too. Not just what my values are, how am I reacting to my values and how are they playing out within my relationships?
And if you want to go a little deeper with that, when we talk about doing something different than your family values, what you were taught, where do you feel that in your body? Do you feel like your chest is freely open to breathe again? Does it feel like your chest is tight and constricted, like you're going to vomit if you think about betraying that? Do you feel tension in your arms that you want to hit something, right? Where are you also feeling this within your body is a really good indicator of things that are happening for you. What are you imagining right now?
Just like, do you feel like you're gonna vomit if you're?
But
It's
sometimes
fair.
you
That's
do.
fair.
No,
You know
that's
it's
legit,
fair.
right?
Absolutely.
If I've experienced my entire
I'm just thinking
life,
that's so hard, you know?
It's
like
so
it's
hard,
really
right?
hard to constantly feel
the idea of setting a boundary with my mother makes me think I'm gonna puke. That's probably a pretty good fucking indicator about what we're dealing
your
with.
body
Here.
is telling you something.
Yes,
your
right?
body is having a literal reaction.
Yep.
It's telling you where you're what you're doing that's aligning with your values and what's not aligning with your values. Great thing to think about. How do I think people, I wrote this question weird, that's why I'm trying to rephrase it. How do I think people see me versus who do I think I am?
Mm-hmm. And who do I want to be?
And who do I want to be?
Just because somebody makes you into something. Oh, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Are my insides, like how I feel about myself in the inside, matching what I'm expressing on the outside, right? Are those two things aligning? And that might be a good indicator. If people are seeing you in a completely different way than how you see yourself, it might be an indicator that what's happening for you internally isn't necessarily coming through on the outside. And what is that doing for you? Your internal self is not aligning with your external self, how is that manifesting itself? Are you anxious? Are you depressed? Are you, what's happening in your relationships? Do you feel separate from people? How is that manifesting itself, and what does that look like for you?
What do I tell myself about who I am or what I care about? Do I discount and minimize my own experiences? Do I tell myself I'm needy for speaking up? Do I tell myself I'm a bother if I use my voice? Do I tell myself I'm a burden, right? What are the things I'm telling
these
myself?
Stories that we have about ourselves, right?
And I think it also goes into, this is when internal family systems theory, which I love, goes into, that's when we have different parts of ourselves, right? So there's a part of myself that desperately needs to be heard and seen, and there's another part of myself that really pushes people away and manages my feelings, right? So it's okay if you're trying to answer some of these and you're like, well, I don't know, parts of me do, parts of me don't. Well, that's great. Let's meet all of those different parts and get to know them.
Write them all down.
Write out all those parts. And a great book for that is No Bad Parts.
Yes.
Richard Schwartz.
Well, and I think as you're doing this activity, I think there can be a lot of anxiety that might be brought up about, like, I don't know who I am or what I feel, and that's okay. And so we want you to just sit with that, take some time with that, and to know, just as we started, that knowing yourself is a journey, and it takes time, and it's a journey that you're on for the rest of your life. And
it changes with milestones and transitions, right? Exactly. Who I was and that worked for me 5 years ago is very different who I am post-pandemic.
Right. And so if you notice that there's a lot of anxiety around these questions, if there's a fear that, oh, you can't figure this out, that it's completely okay to take some time with this. And you can use your experiences as a way to kind of navigate some of these questions, right? Where we say, okay, well, what's this experience bringing up in me? Like, where is this highlighting my values? Try to notice that internal voice that you have that's saying, oh, you're needy, or, beating yourself up in some way. So take your time with this. This is not something that, these questions aren't necessarily easy questions.
No.
Right? They take time. And you could re-ask yourself these questions over and over and over again as you grow and as your life changes and your life transitions. So give yourself time with this. This is just knowing yourself right in this moment, just as you are.
And so this goes to the what stories do I need to release about myself, right? So, Jen, what stories do you think you need to release about yourself?
You really put me on the spot.
I know, it's my favorite thing to do.
That I can't be good at podcasting.
There you go.
We're past 100 episodes now. That's a story that I once had before we started doing this to where we are now.
I could never do anything in the public eye, right?
Never do anything in the public eye, never speak out about never expose some of my emotions to others. I think that that's a big one. I'm very private. That's a story I tell myself about who I am. But am I, given that, like, I'm fucking telling everyone, is
that so true anymore, right?
Exactly. There was a point in time where being private was a narrative or message that really helped me in a lot of ways.
Protection.
for a necessary reason. And now, that story, that narrative that was once very protective was no longer helpful. It was keeping me from stepping out of my comfort zone to grow together. Know yourself, grow yourself. And so to be able to relinquish that and say, well, is it something that's serving me still to be as private, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about you, Em?
I have to retell myself stories every day. Right? So one of mine is that, like, my job is to be, in some ways, an entertainer for people, right? To always make people happy, to soothe it over, to, be the peacekeeper with everything. Like, that's a huge thing I've had to, like, let go of and release. And I think, like, the stories I've also had to tell myself is about what will happen once I let go of these roles, right? Like, once I stop people pleasing, will no one like me anymore? Will I be rejected? And yes, sometimes that totally does happen in some situations. And for the most part, it actually doesn't. But it gives you a lot of information.
Absolutely. And it changes your relationships. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really scary, right? To be able to change that story, that narrative where you can say, like, I don't actually have to entertain people all the time. Except right now you do.
Right now. Okay, so we'll continue with that. What are the things that trigger me the most? What is a touch, and what part of myself, what's my raw spot that it touch, right? Someone would call that an introject.
Yes.
We're gonna call it, we're gonna use non-psychobabble terms.
Right. So this is a really interesting thing because obviously Emmalee and I, in building a business, we encounter challenges all the time. And those because we're therapists and we talk about feelings constantly, those challenges bring up very different triggers for me and very different triggers for Em. And so you can have the same situation and it be triggering for you in a very different way than it would be triggering. I'm using the word triggering, but would bring something in someone else. And so,
like, the maddest I've ever seen Jen in my entire life was like 2 weeks ago. Right. So and for something that I was like, I'm not mad about this.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, there's some parts I was, but like you, like, right. Like, and it's very
and it
interesting.
Also happened at different times, right? We had very different reactions at different times.
Yeah. So we could be living through exactly the same situation and have two very different reactions and two different timelines of how we handled it.
And so if our reaction was anger, the question is, what emotion is it bringing up? Right? Like, and so that's something to really focus on is what is the introject or what's the emotion that it's bringing up for you? Do you feel abandoned? Do you feel taken advantage of? Do you feel...
Is that yours?
What made you think that? I was trying to use abandoned first.
You're like, if I put it as number 2,
right, it's like
no one will see me.
I'm private. Okay?
I'm so private.
I'm private.
You better do the same activity with everyone else.
I know. I'm going to have to.
You will.
But if mine was taken advantage of, what was yours?
Yeah, taken advantage of. Yeah.
Similar.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay, we handled it.
But in a very different way. The reaction comes differently. But
okay,
no, I felt the same thing. Yeah.
Maybe we just felt the same thing.
Maybe we're twins.
Oh.
Haha.
Dun,
okay. What is the dominant emotion that rises from the stage? So that goes into the introjects, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I want you to ask yourself, because we get this question a lot. How do I know myself? And we're going to get into all these questions today. But one of the things I want you to say is, why do you want to know yourself? What is the importance around this? And what are your expectations around this, right? Because you are going to be very disappointed if you think this brings you eternal zen.
Right.
I don't know what fucking monk-ass world people are living at. That's right. You know what I mean? Like, you think you're going to go, like, be a monk and, like, live in something.
1,000%. Where you're just like, I am good forever.
Right? And if you did, and maybe if you separated and lived truly, like, a monk life, then you would be able to do that.
Well,
but the reality is life happens and shit is tough.
I think there's some myth busting that we've done before.
Yes.
And it very much translates into this situation, too, where... in every fairy tale, at the end of the fairy tale, it's like, and they lived happily ever after. Like, no, they fucking didn't.
They fought over bills.
They had
and their
things,
in-laws.
Right. They had chilled. There was a lot of stress. There was
Yes.
financial stress.
Yes.
So I think there's this idea that we are going to reach this kind of, I completely know myself, and in completely knowing myself, I will never have to experience pain again.
And it does go into like the magical thinking, which we've done episodes about, which is that, right? Like, well, once I lose the weight, that I won't have body image issues. The fuck you won't, right? Once I truly know myself, I won't ever react to my mom again. Okay. You can try, but man, you're still human. And like, it really does intellectualize it.
Yes.
If I can think myself out of it. But a lot of this is about feeling, and you can't stop feelings.
Because you're human. And the fact of the matter is, you don't want to stop feelings, because the good ones, I shouldn't say good and bad. I actually,
you did.
I want to change that to pleasant and unpleasant feelings, right? So
tolerable and intolerable.
Tolerable and intolerable, or just that we have to be able to experience the unpleasant ones in order to be able to experience the pleasant ones.
So let's go to some listener questions.
Let's do it.
Because I think this goes into it, right? So somebody had wrote in, how do we get started? There are so many different resources you could do. So you could follow like journal prompts, what we're talking about. There's tons of guided journal that you can do. But one of the things I would ask you is start by understanding and looking back. One of the things we recommend is 3 generations to first understand where I came from. What was around me? What did I experience growing up? And what are the things I think that maybe don't feel super aligned?
My obviously first thought that comes up is therapy.
I didn't want to say that one. It felt obvious.
Number 2, we need to make a number. If you make everything the second thing you say, right? But there's really something to be said about externalizing your thoughts. You know, like that. It's one thing, we think we really know ourselves because we sit with our thoughts all the time. But it's really different to hear yourself say those thoughts out loud to someone else. And it gives you an opportunity to formulate and reformulate and just figure out what they mean and have someone in that journey with you. And so I know it's so cliche because we're therapists, but I do really think it's incredibly helpful.
Yes, to go to therapy. And to have a therapist that does deeper work, right? Like if you're just going, like you can't go see a solution-focused therapist.
Unless you don't want to do deeper work.
Well, there you go.
Right. But then you want to be listening to this episode.
But then why are they trying to know yourself, grow yourself?
I don't know. Maybe they're like dipping their toe in.
Okay, well, I like a little toe dip. I like a toe dip. Okay. What age do you feel like you knew yourself? I will say this. I have grown to know parts of myself at this age. I find that I meet new parts of myself all the time.
Constantly.
And that does not mean that I'm not doing amazing work. It means that we are complex, ever-changing people. And we are living and alive. And something about living and alive is constant changing and flowing. So there's lots of parts of myself that I've gotten to know very, very well. And there's parts of myself that I still try to keep locked down in a cellar and let out very rarely that I need to work on meeting more.
Locked down in a cellar.
Right? Like that exile, baby. You're just like, shove them down.
Like, don't come out of there.
Right?
Yeah, and I also think that there's different situations that are going to prompt you to have to know yourself in different ways, right? Like I would guess that becoming a mother has pushed you to get to know different parts of yourself that maybe
I was just going to say fucked me up.
That's something. Same. Same.
Yeah. Okay,
but like pushed you to get to know those different parts of yourself that maybe you wouldn't have had to get to know.
Absolutely.
In other ways.
Yep.
Right? And so situations that you're in will bring that out in you and want to validate the fact that that can be really scary, right? It can be really scary to have to meet different parts of yourself that you have tried to push and lock down.
Especially when you feel shame.
Yes.
A large amount of shame from them.
Oh, yeah. And so I want you to try to greet those parts with curiosity and really taking the time to say, who are you? Who are you? See if you can really talk to yourself in a way that's nurturing and comforting and say, this is a new part of me that I want to get to know. And so how can I sit with this? How can I give myself time to really get to know this person? Think about how you would get to know anyone else. What questions would you ask them?
And wouldn't it take time?
If you were on a first date,
what questions would you ask?
Best first date you've ever been on, you were like, I want to get real deep with this person. What questions would you ask that person?
Okay, but you want to know what's funny is like when I think about like my ideal first date, it's not depth, it's fun.
Oh, see, mine's a mixture.
Yeah, right. Like you're like, let's get deep fast. Like I'd be like, I just want to have fun and enjoy each other and like see if I can like hang with this person.
On my first date with my husband, I was like, oh damn. He said to me, "What are you looking for in a relationship?"
Okay. What did he read that in an article about the perfect thing to say?
But I know you didn't date after college.
No, I met my husband drunk and horny, and
But
it.
I can tell you, after you go on a million like first dates with people, it is so refreshing to have someone
direct conversation,
ask you a direct, deeper conversation.
But how did he even know to say that? Can we get him on? Did he say that on all his days, or he just really wanted to make it work with you?
I think he was really into me. He said he knew he was going to marry me at the moment he saw me, which I think is a bunch of bullshit.
That would be very impressive if that was
true. But
he
does. He loves deep questions, and he wants to come on the podcast, so please don't tempt him, because I'd rather die.
I know. I really want... No. I mean, I was on the phone with him, like, last week. You know that. Like, I really wanted to come on the
I'd rather die. It's not happening.
But he's never listened to an episode. We said if he listens to 3 episodes...
I'm giving him 5.
Oh, 5. If he listens to 5 episodes, he can come on.
Mm-hmm. And we have to quiz him.
Oh, deal. Okay, good. That's hilarious. Do you think that indecisiveness or looking for external validation a result of not knowing yourself? I think it's about desperately wanting to know yourself.
I also think there's a level... I don't think one thing can equate to exactly one other thing.
It doesn't work like that.
Right? I wish that it would, because I feel like it would save us so much time. But I think that it also... it can be about anxiety. Like there's a lot of anxiety in not knowing yourself, or there's a lot of anxiety in trying to figure yourself out. But something that might be helpful is to think about, are you indecisive in every situation? Are there only certain situations that you're indecisive about? Like, what are the things that have more anxiety around making a decision? And to ask yourself, what are the reasons why it's scary for me to make a decision? Does it feel scary? Does it feel like, oh, I just don't know what I align with? Does it feel like, okay, I could be happy with either one, right? Like, or I could manage either one. I could adapt to either one. My first thought when this comes up, what's like the first thing you think of when you think of being indecisive?
Eating dinner.
Yeah.
Eating lunch, really. Lunch is so much harder than dinner, I think. I never know what to eat.
It's right. You're just like, there's so many options. It's like annoying to make a decision.
Yeah.
So I think that's just so common too.
Yeah, right. And that doesn't mean, right. That also doesn't mean I don't know what foods I like. It just
right. You don't know yourself in some way.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes shit's just hard and overwhelming. And also we have to make so many decisions on a daily basis. Everything's hard.
And you get decision fatigue after a while. So that's another thing to ask yourself. Are you in a position where you're having to make decisions all the time?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, you can very easily get decision fatigue, decision burnout. And you're just like, I don't want to have to make another fucking decision.
Yeah. Somebody asked in, how to know when your decisions are actually what you want versus being overly influenced by others. Also, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, you'll see that I've been playing with this tiny banana.
Oh, I love
And you might think, what's she doing? And it is me playing with a tiny banana.
Okay, that one makes me uncomfortable.
It is weird. He's half peeled.
Can I touch it?
Well, he was mine, but yeah.
I'll give him back. Okay. Oh, he's like a person.
Yeah, he's half peeled, though. He
has hands and feet.
He's half undressed.
It's really...
Okay. So, all right. Again, how to know when your decisions are actually what you want versus being overly influenced by others.
I wonder if the person's asking this question, if they maybe already know the answer.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that, are you frequently influenced by other people? And is that something that often drives your decisions?
Yeah.
I think when you're someone who is an empathetic person, cares about other people, that your concern about other people in the situation is always going to be a factor. And that it's okay to take that into consideration, but it's a matter of how much does it drive the decisions you're making, right? In any relationship, you're going to have to compromise.
Yeah.
Right? And but to be able to know, right, I'm making a compromise. This is what I want, and this is what this other person wants. There's a statistic, and I'm going to fucking botch this, that a lot of people stay in relationships that they're unhappy in, not more so because they're fearful of hurting the other person. And that kind of drives that decision on their end. And so I think you can look at it too as like a little bit of a pendulum, where can you acknowledge how much other people might take stake in your decision making, and how much you act on the decision based on what other people want, and also how does that affect you?
The thing that comes up for me around this comment is, if you are someone who is easily influenced by others, how often are you first going to them to ask them?
Ooh.
Right? If I'm someone who like doubts myself, how much am I calling other people? Because that can really confuse shit. And sometimes we do it to ourselves.
Calling other people, like asking them.
Yes, right? Like we always asking other people's opinion.
Yeah.
And then we're so influenced that. But like, you can also not do that. Like you can like, you know what I mean? Like have an internal dialogue with yourself, or have a therapist, or have like one person who you know like really shows up for you and you like feel like very confident in. You do not have to involve everyone with every fucking decision. If you are someone who is easily, like we'll call you a sponge. If you're someone who is easily absorbent, then maybe you're not a candidate for going around asking everyone all their opinions all the time. And sometimes we've been taught to do that.
Yes. And I think something, if you look back at past experiences, times in which maybe you've taken other people's opinions into consideration of your decisions, how has that worked out for you, right? Did you feel good about the decision that you made in the end? Did it feel aligned with your values? Because that sometimes happens, is that, you know, when we take everyone else's opinions into consideration, we're taking what they value into consideration, not necessarily what we value. And so our decisions then sometimes don't align with the things that we value. They align with the things that other people value. And that is that.
And it could also just increase our anxiety.
Right.
And then cause...
Especially if you're getting like a million different responses from
especially
people.
if it's about someone else. Then you're just triangulating shit in as opposed to like talking to people, right? What do you got? What do you got, Jetty?
How do I determine my boundaries? I've been told what to think and do forever. I think that we talked about this earlier. I think your body helps you determine what your boundaries are, right? When you're having an emotional or physical reaction to something, where someone, you know, your body is giving you some sort of indicator that you might need a boundary there. Anger a lot of the times can determine where we're missing boundaries, right? Like if we're anger is a very protective emotion or reaction, and you can look at it as anger is almost an emotional boundary, right? So instead of setting a non-reactive boundary and saying like, hey, listen, you know, I need to take a little time away, we instead react or have a very angry reaction. Or you can look at shutting down as an emotional boundary that more of a reaction, right? So if you're in a situation where you recognize you're shutting down, your body might be telling you that, oh, you're looking for a boundary right now, whether that means in your romantic relationships where you need to take some time out or you need to take some separation and you need to express it to each other. So I think that our bodies and emotions naturally react when we need a boundary, but we don't necessarily we don't attune to them in the ways that we might need to.
Well, and especially if you grew up in like, let's say someone who grew up in a cult or grew up in an incredibly oppressed system or a very controlling system, you really did not form the ability to make some of these decisions, maybe like your peer group. So you might have to also think about is that if I grew up in a house where I wasn't allowed to make my own decisions, you may often feel childlike sometimes. And that's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's that shit takes time and there's growth with it. So like to say to yourself, like, how much mastery do I truly have in this area? How much have I been able to adopt and learn and grow? And if I haven't given that, no matter what my chronological age is, I could be 45 coming out of the system and feeling very much like I'm a 10-year-old, right?
Yes.
And so part of this is like, how do I reflect about like how much opportunity I got to really do this on my own?
And I think, you know, as you were talking about that, I was thinking you very much learn to not trust yourself or trust your boundaries or trust how you're responding to these things. You learn to kind of push that down and say that that's not relevant. And so you can look at this also as an opportunity to relearn how to trust yourself and trust your reactions and trust your responses and say, okay, well, what do I want to do with this? Because clearly my body is telling me something.
What's your body telling you right now?
It's telling me to go to sleep.
Okay. All right, 2 more, and then we have to do Dear Em and Jen. Okay, you got. Do you want to go?
No, I couldn't tell. I don't know. I wasn't looking. I didn't know.
So I like somebody. You know me. I always love my talk about motherhood ones, right? So tips for staying in tune with myself as I transition into motherhood. I think one of the questions is what are the parts of myself that I might have to shift to also hold on to myself. If I'm the person who's not good at asking for help, I may need to reevaluate that in some ways to hold on to myself in motherhood. If I'm the person who likes to act like everything's great, and then all of a sudden I notice that I have postpartum rage, right? Then hold on, I have a pretending problem holding on, right? So one of the things you might have to say is like, part of this holding on to yourself in the transition of motherhood, or the transition of any type of thing really, of staying in tune with yourself, is like, what are the parts of myself that are thriving right now? What are the parts of myself that are feeling overwhelmed and dismissed right now? And am I trying to ignore parts of myself to just take on this new role and ignore who I am as a person?
I had nothing. I was just supporting you.
You could speak to your fiddly fig. I mean, you mother that thing like I've never seen.
Oh.
No, you gonna tell me he died? Oh my god. Oh my god.
The thing is, I have to repot it.
And you haven't been doing it?
And I don't know how.
All right, well, if somebody knows how to repot a plant, can you...
It feels like a large, dirty task.
It's definitely a large, dirty fucking task, dude. That's part of owning plants,
so I'm really glad you brought that up, because I'm feeling really overwhelmed about repotting her.
Okay, well, somebody please send Jen in how to repot the fiddly fig. Okay. You can do last one.
Okay.
So Millie says. She goes, last one.
I like this one. Can you know yourself too much? Sometimes I feel like self-awareness hinders me.
Yes. Yeah. Stop thinking so much.
Stop.
Holy
You're
shit.
overthinking.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, this is the issue about, like, also the overthinking and that's why we're saying, like, what are your expectations with really knowing yourself? Because part of this is also, like, makes everything on an individual level. We cannot stop a war from happening.
Right.
We cannot stop global crisis. We cannot stop a pandemic. We cannot stop late stage capitalism, right? And so, like, the thing is when we try to say things like climate change, I can fucking do as much as I can to compost and recycle and don't use single-use plastics, but if we got large corporations that aren't doing this shit, it's very little that I can do. So one of the issues is this overimportance on self-healing and growth makes it very individualistic, but like we need larger change than that on a very deep systemic level for there to be something different.
1,000%. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a level of self-awareness too that is, people can develop, but I think that there's also something where you just have a natural sense of yourself, a natural self-awareness, a natural ability to ask yourself questions about who you are, to meta-think. And I think that there's, or it's possible that developed as a survival mechanism growing up. But it's not something that you necessarily can take away, right? Yeah. Like, it's not something that, and there's ways in which it can be so helpful for you, but it's important to know when are the times in which indulging in it is helpful for me, and then when are the times in which maybe I need to separate myself a little bit from it. Maybe I need to, like, lighten the mood. Maybe I need to, like, distract myself a little bit. That sometimes overindulging it, can be hard. It can bring up a lot of stress. There's a lot of systemic issues that we don't have control over. And so what are the things that you can do to take care of yourself, where sometimes overindulging in it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. Dear Em and Jen.
Let's do it.
Dear Em and Jen, how do you know yourself when you're a people pleaser? As a recovering people pleaser, I feel like I've spent my whole life doing whatever anyone else wanted. Now I'm in this new phase where I'm making decisions purely for myself for the first time in my life, and I find that it's so hard to know who I really am and what I actually want because I've spent my whole life bending for others and making decisions based on what everyone else wanted. I feel like I don't know who I am because I've always conformed to everyone around me.
First of all, the fact that you wrote this in means you're already on your way.
Yeah.
But I think that as a people pleaser, as someone who's consistently concerned about how other people feel in every situation, that it's almost a muscle that you have to build to be able to come to every relationship and say, okay, what do I want in this relationship, and how can we both get our needs met, and how do I communicate that? Because it's going to be more natural for you to fall towards the other end of it because it's something you've been doing for so long. We always say the things that feel most comfortable for us are the things that we gravitate towards. And so it is once again, it's a practice, and it's okay for this to take time and for you to reset in every single relationship. And when you change something in a relationship, it also requires the other person to adjust to that. So if people in your life are so used to you bending for them or doing what they want, there's going to be an adjustment on their end when you start expressing what your own needs are. And so how can you manage the anxiety that might come around the other person reacting to you expressing what your needs are? Because that's going to be another piece of this, is managing the anxiety that comes around in those relationships so that you can stay true to who you are and those boundaries that you want to set.
I have no words. That was perfect. You did it.
We did it.
Hey, thanks for knowing yourself, growing yourself.
If you enjoyed this episode or you think it would be helpful for a friend, send it on over to them. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. I believe it's follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. What else do we say at the end of this?
And, well, now you can check out ShrinkChicks.com if you're interested in getting some merch and learning anything else about us. But mainly, we thank you for being here. We love you. Take care of yourself. And never forget to grow yourself. You got to know yourself. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.